Should you or should you not take an English exam? That's a question that many English learners have to grapple with at some point in their learning journey. And we as teachers don't always agree on the effectiveness of exam preparation and taking English exams. So in this video, my special guest and I are going to talk about the pros and cons of taking English exams so that you can take an informed decision. And later, I'm going to explain why I've changed my mind a little bit over the last few years on this matter. Now, many of you probably know that I specialize in Cambridge English exam preparation, so the B2 First, C1 Advanced, and C2 Proficiency exams. But in this video, we're going to just talk about English exams in general. So let me introduce my special guest. He's a friend of the channel. He's a former Cambridge speaking examiner. He's a current, very experienced and good English teacher, a podcaster, an all-round good egg. Although he's an Arsenal fan, but we won't talk about that. It's Craig. Craig, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me again.
Thank you very much, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here as usual. Go Gunners. There we go. Up the
Well,
Arsenal.
yeah, you're doing very well at the moment. My team, West Ham, are doing very badly, so we won't talk any more about football. We're talking about exams today.
Right.
So yeah, we're going to talk about whether you should or should not take an English exam. But I should mention that here we're talking about those of you who haven't taken a decision yet, or maybe you've started your preparation and you're having second thoughts, because of course, for some of you, it may be a necessity. Maybe you have to take an exam for your work or for your studies or for immigration purposes even. So you don't really have a decision to take. You don't have to ask whether you should or shouldn't. You just have to. So we're going to list some reasons to take an exam. So some reasons for taking an English exam and some reasons against taking an English exam. So, Craig, are you ready to get started?
I'm ready. And it might be an idea for people watching to take a piece of paper as we're going through these points and just do a pros and cons, because you might be thinking, do I need this exam? There's so much going on in my life at the moment. Do I have the time? Do I have the headspace to get into the preparation mode and do this exam? So I think we can help you with that, because everyone comes from a different point, don't they? A different angle to this. So hopefully going through these points with you, then you'll be able to make an informed decision.
We're going to start with some reasons not to take an English exam, and then later we'll look at reasons to take an English exam. Now, one of the drawbacks of exam preparation and taking an English exam in general is that it gives you the wrong focus. It's a little bit unnatural. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the focus when you're preparing for an exam is on studying the grammar, the vocabulary. And it's also a lot about strategy, about the best strategy for each part of the exam in order to get the highest score possible. And it's not so much about communication, which is really what learning a language is all about. So, if you decide to take an exam and all the focus is on just how to pass the exam, you're not necessarily really doing what is necessary or the best to just improve your English in general.
Absolutely. I mean, exam preparation can sometimes lead to the feeling of learning English like for the test rather than for real life communication. And you might memorize exam strategies, as you said, Ben, or model answers instead of developing natural speaking abilities and writing skills. And sometimes when I'm teaching, I find myself teaching those fixed conversation expressions like, from my point of view, as I see it, as far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
in my considered opinion, you make a good point. I couldn't agree more. And I ask myself as I'm teaching them, do I use those expressions? They're fantastic for the collaborative tasks in the Cambridge exams, for example, but are they really what people use in real life?
Mhm.
So you have to bear that in mind. Is it really natural?
Yeah, I have to say that in my preparation courses, my online preparation courses, I really focus on strategy because that's the best way to pass an exam, but not necessarily the best way to learn English. But it's not the same for anyone. And we'll talk more about that later. So yeah, maybe not the best focus, but a reason not to take an English exam is that it can cause extra stress and anxiety. And in the modern world, we don't need more of that, do we, Craig?
No, we don't. Some people have enough stress in their lives already, and there's that fear of failing that you might experience before the exam nerves. And I mean, as you said at the beginning, Ben, if you need it for work or study purposes, maybe immigration purposes, then you have no choice, really. You just have to accept the stress.
Yeah.
But do you need that extra stress and pressure in your life? That's another consideration.
Exactly, and it can also create a kind of negative relationship with English. I mean, maybe you have a good relationship with English. You're studying, you're doing something every day, watching films, reading, maybe you have a speaking partner, or you're enjoying the journey, and then you take an English exam, and suddenly it becomes stressful and tense, and it creates this anxiety, and that can have a detrimental effect in the long term on your relationship with the English language or with the learning process. So to voluntarily create more stress and anxiety is maybe not the best idea.
Yeah.
And the next point I have is that taking an exam is not a final destination. I just kind of touched on that a little bit. You know, when you're preparing for an exam, it is, and it must be short term. It's a short term objective. You maybe spend a few months preparing for the exam, and you take the exam, and then you get a certificate, and that's great. But that's not it. Even if you get like the C2 proficiency Cambridge English exam, which is the highest level, that's not the end of your journey, your English learning journey. It's just another step. So you know that it can create a false sense of progress. I mean, it is real progress, but it's not a destination.
Yeah, I think there's a danger sometimes in setting goals, and some people love to set goals and achieve them, and that's fine.
Mhm.
But I think passing a Cambridge exam or any exam, it doesn't necessarily mean you've finished learning English. You can put the books away and that's it. I think it's better to think of putting systems in place and then passing the exam as a natural progression. In other words, what would you prefer to say or think? Would it be better to say, I have a C1 advanced English qualification, or I'm the kind of person who studies English every day and improves constantly? And I
Mhm.
think there's a difference between publishing a book and actually being a writer or
Mhm.
doing a marathon or being a runner. So
Right.
I think if you create a constant study habit or some maybe let's say a ritual of study that's consistent, I think you'll pass the exams without setting the goal. But of course, you need the strategies. But creating that habit, I think, is sometimes more important than setting the goal and achieving it.
Another reason why perhaps you shouldn't take an English exam is that sometimes they could be considered unfair. And what I mean by that is that they don't always evaluate or assess your true level. They're not, or represent your true level. Maybe you could prepare for and pass the C1 advanced exam, and another student may fail the exam. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have a higher level than them. It just may mean that you're better at taking exams. Maybe you prepared better. Maybe you have a better strategy for each part. Maybe you just got a bit lucky on the day of the exam that there were topics in the reading and listening that you could relate to more, or maybe you just had a better night's sleep the night before than the other student, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have a better level. So they're not perfect. English exams are not perfect, and maybe you could consider them a little bit unfair, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had many students on my conversation courses who are not so great with grammar, and maybe they wouldn't necessarily pass the grammar part of an exam, but they are very, very effective communicators in English. So
Mm.
they can handle pretty much any situation in English, including job interviews, public speaking, but they do have lots of holes in their grammar, and that would not necessarily get them through an exam. So, yeah, it can be very unfair. It's not necessarily passing an exam is not necessarily representative of a good level.
Yeah, and also we have the fact that grammar, for example, is not as sort of black and white as it appears in exercise books. You know, in real life, native English speakers we make mistakes, but often we wouldn't consider them mistakes. It's just part of the local dialect. That in an exam that would be considered incorrect, but that's not the case in real life. So a student, as Craig said, who can communicate extremely well but makes a few grammar mistakes may not get as good a score as a student who perhaps doesn't communicate so well but doesn't make so many mistakes. But again, it depends on the exams. Some exams are better at evaluating the overall level than others.
I think there's another thing to add as well, which maybe connects more to the previous point, but you'll be spending time preparing for an exam, focusing on skills that you may not ever use. So you may be really sharpening your ability for extensive reading, for example, or maybe writing a business proposal or an essay, which you would never have to do in real life. So
Mhm.
that might be taking time in your English study away from maybe improving your skills that are more practical for you to use in your day-to-day life, in your job, for example.
It's true. I've never written a proposal in my life,
Me,
and,
me neither,
and
or an academic essay since university. So
right, yeah, yeah. But it's something that is tested in the Cambridge English exams, for example. So yeah, I mean, I suspect that exams in the next 5 or 10 years will probably change quite a lot for many
yeah,
reasons.
I think so.
And yeah, the final reason why perhaps you shouldn't take an English exam, or a consideration at least, is the cost. That's just a very practical reason, but it costs money to prepare for and take in an exam. I mean, you can prepare nowadays without spending too much money. There's a lot of material available online, free material, but if you want to prepare thoroughly and make sure you to give yourself the best chance possible, it's a good idea to get some books or enroll on a course. That costs money, and then the exam itself costs money, and you can't ignore the fact that that's an important consideration when you're thinking of taking an exam.
That's a very good point. I don't know. I think it varies from country to country and region to region, but I think a ballpark figure, an approximate figure would be, what is it, €200 more or less to take an exam in Spain these days? And as you said, Ben, there's materials that maybe you need to buy, and it can get quite expensive. And maybe also, I don't know if you agree, Ben, but there's also a time commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And you can say it's a cost in money, but it's also a cost in time, meaning that, okay, you're spending time doing these sentence transformations, perhaps, or practicing your writing, etc., where you could use that time more effectively studying English in a way that would benefit you more in your job, for example.
That's a very good point. It takes time to prepare for an exam, I mean, months usually, and dedicating some time more or less every day. But I think this is a good bridge to take us to the reasons or the benefits, the advantages of exam preparation, because as you said, it depends how that free time. If you decide not to take an exam, not prepare for an exam, then how would you use that time? But many people probably wouldn't use that time to study English or to practice their English. So for me, that could be seen as a positive, that it kind of forces you to dedicate more time to English. Maybe it's doing exam tasks, but it's better than nothing. So it depends. It
Right.
depends on the person and how they use that time.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that brings us on to the positives. The
Yes, let's get into the good stuff now,
Yeah, because I
Ben.
think
Let's
everyone
get
we've just convinced everyone not to
not to
take an
forget
exam,
about exams.
but it's not that simple. I think, and as I said, yeah, for me, a few years ago, I was quite negative about exams. I've been helping students prepare for Cambridge English exams for many years, but I've always thought of it as a bit of a necessary evil. That yeah, people have to take the exams. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'm happy to help them as they have to do it. But over the last few years, where I've helped thousands of students prepare for their Cambridge English exams, I've kind of changed my mind a little bit, and I'm going to talk about that as we go through the points of reasons why you should take in an exam, because there are many reasons, positive reasons to take an exam, and many advantages to exam preparation. For me, the first one, and perhaps the most important, I'm not sure. Again, it depends on the person, but when you decide to take an exam, it can help you organize and structure your studies. If you just decide you want to learn a language or maybe improve your English level, it's like, where do you start? There's so much to do, right? You learn vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation. You need to speak, you need to write, you need to read. It's very difficult to know what to do on a day-to-day basis. But when you decide to take an exam, it inevitably will help you organize your studies because you have to prepare for each part of the exam. You have to practice your writing in a structured way. You have to practice the listening tasks, the reading, speaking. So I think for many people who are a little bit lost or don't know where to start or where to continue or how to continue, I think exam preparation can give them that organization and structure.
It's balance, isn't it? It's all about focused learning. I have a student at the
Yeah.
moment who has an incredibly wide vocabulary, very, very fluent speech, very effective speech, good pronunciation, excellent reading and listening skills. But this person's writing is terrible. There's a big discrepancy between some of her skills and writing. So having that exam focus gives you really good balance on all the four skills. And as you said, it can help you study more efficiently and stay consistent and focused rather than learning English in an unorganized or random way. So going back to the negative point we just discussed, well, should I spend the time maybe improving the way I speak in meetings? Well, that's a good thing, but then you get a framework with an exam that's going to lift all of your skills level up. So
Yeah.
at the same time, so you're distributing equally amongst them.
Yeah. You're kind of forced to practice all the skills, and if you don't have that obligation, you probably wouldn't, because nobody likes writing, and writing is extremely useful when you're learning a language. As we said earlier, maybe you'll never have to write a report or a proposal or an essay, but it is really good to consciously and actively and proactively use the grammar and vocabulary when you're writing, because you can use it when you're speaking, but you don't have time to really think about what the structures you're using and the vocabulary you're using. So if having this obligation to write for in your exam preparation is really beneficial, I think. So
Yeah,
something you probably wouldn't do if you didn't have to prepare for an exam.
absolutely.
Yeah. And the next point, and it's quite an obvious one, perhaps, but it's extremely practical. And it's probably one of the main reasons that people take exams is to improve their career opportunities. Obviously, it's very competitive in many countries and cities. It's a very competitive job market out there. So if you can put on your CV that you have a C1 advanced certificate or C2 proficiency or whatever, it really can give you a clear advantage rather than just say, I have more or less an advanced level of English. If you can back that up with a certificate, we'll give you an advantage in the job market.
Yeah, you never know when you might be offered a job abroad, for example, and you're going to need to show evidence of your language level.
Exactly. And it's just a more tangible proof that you have the level rather than, I think most people, I wouldn't say most people lie on their CVs. I wouldn't go that far, but
Bend the truth.
bend the truth, exaggerate a little bit. I mean, that's part of what a CV is. You're kind of, you want to present yourself in the best light
Promoting yourself.
possible.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, okay. The next point, and this is an extremely important one. The next reason why I think it can help many people, exam preparation can help many people with their English for motivation. Again, maybe it's obvious, but often if you've been studying English or learning English for many years, it's difficult to motivate yourself on a daily basis to do something in English. And we kind of often we reach that plateau where we're not really improving. Maybe we watch a series every now and again, maybe we read a book every now and again, but you're not that motivated on a day-to-day basis. And signing up for an exam, enrolling on an exam, maybe in 6 months you have the exam, you're going to be more motivated. I mean, Craig mentioned marathon running before. It's the same. If you sign up for a marathon, you're going to be, on a cold, wet Tuesday morning, you're more likely to go out running than if you hadn't signed up for that marathon. So yeah, it's very clear that exams can help you with motivation.
Perhaps we should speak a little about the procrastinator. And
Mhm.
I'm sure you've come across this student, Ben. It's the kind of student who's studying for an exam, but they're never quite ready to fix a date. They're never quite there. They don't want to take the bull by the horns, to use a Spanish expression, to
Mhm.
make the commitment to set that deadline. They're never there. Well, and the
Yeah.
goal becomes very nebulous. The goal is not very clear. Yeah, maybe this year. Well, no, I think maybe next year. So setting that date will motivate you. You're preparing for an exam. You've got structure. You know when you're going to take the exam. There's a deadline. There's a reason to study regularly and put those systems in place that I mentioned earlier. And yeah, I think reaching a specific level or passing a difficult test can give you a strong sense of purpose and
Mm.
direction.
And the date is important. Students
Yeah,
often ask me when should I, how long should I give myself to prepare? I always say that minimum 2 months, and I think probably a maximum of 6 months, because if you set that the date like in 2 years, then you're going to
yeah.
lose the advantage of the motivation aspect of it, because you can have a year and a half to procrastinate probably, and then
Exactly. There's not that sense of the clock ticking, is there, if it's 2 years
exactly,
away?
yeah, you want to not too soon because you want time to prepare, and but not too far off in the distant future, because you need, yeah, you need that clock ticking in your
Hmm.
head. And the next point I'd like to make, another, and this is really what's changed my mind over the last few years, why I'm a little bit more positive about Cambridge English exams in general, is the personal challenge aspect. I have a lot of students who are preparing for the C2 proficiency exam, and they don't necessarily need, C1 is usually enough for most situations, for most jobs or immigration purposes. And the students who come to me for help with C2 proficiency Cambridge English exam preparation, they have obviously have a very high level of English, or they wouldn't even be considering taking the exam. But they've kind of, it's partly due to motivation, but they just need something or want something to challenge themselves to get to get to that next level, to push. Often they're English teachers who maybe teach children, or obviously teach people with a lower level of English, so they're kind of just teaching the same grammar and vocabulary, and they're not really challenging themselves. So taking a high level English exam for many people is a personal challenge, and I've really seen it work. It's really effective. As I said, I was more skeptical or more negative about English exams a few years ago, but I've seen so many students recently get huge benefits from just that personal challenge. They find it, yeah, motivating, but it's getting that goal, and just challenging themselves to write essays, to speak more fluently, and interact better with their partners, or improve their English. Sorry, their listening comprehension. Again, it's not for everyone. It depends on the individual student, because some people may not see it as a personal challenge, or maybe they don't need a personal challenge. But I've seen it so often that it's huge. Have you seen it, Craig, with your students?
Yes, I have. And for the reasons that you just said, the discipline, the perseverance, pushing yourself outside your comfort zone to get that goal, to reach that goal. And I said before, I'm not against people setting goals and achieving them when I mentioned the idea about systems, but because some people thrive on setting goals, some people it really pushes them to excel and pushes them to get to different levels in their life in different areas, like training for a marathon and then running it and then achieving it. It's a fantastic sense of achievement.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. We have one more point, one more reason to take an exam, to take an English exam. But first, I wanted to mention that Craig has conversation courses. So I'm going to put his link to his website, because that's a great way to practice your English, whether you're taking an English exam or not. But yeah, just tell us a little bit more about those conversation courses, Craig.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ben. They're small groups of lovely people who are motivated to improve their spoken English. So there's a focus on effective communication, and we meet online on Zoom, and we speak about a topic. Every lesson has a different topic, And there are discussions, debates, role plays, fun activities, presentations for the more advanced students. And yeah, if you're interested in improving your spoken English in a very friendly, safe environment, then go over to englishcraig.com and get in touch. And you can have a free consultation with me, and I'll give you more information.
So I'll put a link to that into Craig's website, but also Craig has a podcast called Ingles Podcast, which is very entertaining and very useful. So all the links in the description. But let's go to the final reason to take an English exam, and that's, I think this is a sometimes an overlooked point, but it's a good way to measure your progress, because when we're learning a language, especially when you get to sort of intermediate level, again, it's that plateau I spoke about. You can't sometimes really feel or notice the improvement. You don't feel the progress. And it can be frustrating and demotivating, demoralizing. Different exams have different formats. So, for example, the Cambridge English exams, you have a different exam for each level. So, for example, B2 first, then if you pass that, maybe you'll want to take the C1 advanced, and then later maybe the C2 proficiency. And that's really measuring your progress in a very tangible way. Or in the IELTS exam, for example, everyone takes the same exam, but you get a different score. So you could take the exam. Also, the IELTS exam expires every 2 years, so you may need to take it again, and then you'll see if you can get a higher score each time.
Yes, it gives you a confidence boost and increases your self-esteem, and it shows you how far you come. And I think it's just as important, sometimes, perhaps more important, to look back on what your English was like a year, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and not how you want it to be in the future. So don't compare yourself with others. Look back and see how far you've come. And then when you decide to study for an exam, that will identify your strengths and your weaknesses, the areas that you need to improve. And then you can use it to measure your progress as you're getting better and improving your English. So it gives you a clear feedback, a very good measurement on how you're doing with your English, and it will show you what areas you need to work on more, which is another very big positive of preparing for an exam.
Yeah. So as you can see, there are many reasons why you shouldn't take an English exam, but also many reasons why you should. So at the end of the day, it depends. Like most questions, it depends on you really, your personal situation, and whether you need it for motivation, for the challenge. But you have to always keep in mind that the final objective is not to get a C2 certificate. The final objective is to be able to communicate effectively in English, and potentially exam preparation can help you with that. But yeah, it depends. Any
Yeah.
last words, Craig?
No, I think we've covered it very, very well. But what I would say is that if you are thinking of preparing for an exam, especially a Cambridge exam, then Ben's your man. I mean, I've known Ben for a long time, and I've had some incredibly good feedback from students of his about his courses. So I definitely recommend going over and having a look at Ben's website.
Thank you very much, Craig. The links to my courses will also be in the description. So yeah, if you need, you can always contact me too if you need any advice or any help, or if you have any questions about the courses. So yeah, and share in the comments if you have any other reasons why you think it's a good idea to take an exam, or maybe you've had a bad experience with exam preparation and you'd recommend that people don't take English exams. Share your
Mhm.
experiences and your thoughts in the comments.
Or
And yeah,
maybe you don't agree with something we've said. That's also possible. So yeah,
no,
let us know in the comments.
that's not possible. Of course, they agree with everything we've said.
Of course.
Anyway, Craig, thank you so much for joining me again. It was great,
Pleasure.
and I'll have you back on the channel again soon if you're if you're willing to do that.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure, Ben. Thanks very much. And good luck with your exam preparation, all of you out there preparing for Cambridge exams. All the best.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll crush it.
You'll crush it.